We're joined by senior college football writer, columnist Bruce Feldman, theathletic.com. And, Bruce, we appreciate your time with Craig and Paul. David Smoke, thanks for your time. The Bill Belichick story, when did that get on your radar? Was it when everybody else heard about it, or had you seen or had whispers before then?
It was about a week ago. I got a text from somebody who's, from another coach. And when he referenced BB at North Carolina, I was just like, BB. And then I was like, and this person has a connection to Bill Belichick. So I was like, Bill Belichick. It just kind of blew my mind. We started searching around and couldn't find anything. And then about the only thing I had seen was one of the recruiting sites that covers North Carolina had done either a message board post or something, like a couple hours earlier. And so, we tried to vet it and see where it was going. It's still very surreal that it's actually happened, though, just we were talking about, just from this standpoint. They replaced Mac Brown, who's in his mid-70s, with another guy who's in his mid-70s. That kind of thing almost never happens. But just the fact that it's Bill Belichick, who won 6 Super Bowls, the most successful head coach in NFL history, has never been in college, and now he's going to be a college coach. It's just kind of mind-blowing.
How do you think the recruits will respond to this?
I think some will be very, very engaged and excited to talk to him because he's a legend. I mean, the guy's won 6 Super Bowls as a head coach and 8 overall. I mean, you just don't meet, he's different, and so I think there's a level of cachet there. Now, I think there's going to be a bunch of recruits who they are not going to probably, either they don't know who he is or don't know probably that much about him because, kids who are getting recruited, unless they're in the portal, if you're a high school junior or even a high school senior at this point, they've had 3 of the last 4 seasons have been losing seasons. He didn't coach this year. So, there's just, unless you're a big NFL fan, you might not remember when he was in the Super Bowl last, and so I think it'll be an interesting thing. And for a lot of kids now who are recruits, I think it's great, to meet these big name coaches, but I think a lot of them are moved by, okay, what kind of NIL deal am I getting? Now, I think some of them are going to be moved by, this guy knows more about the NFL and probably playing in it and thriving in it than anybody I could play for. So I think that will be, an interesting piece of how this all unfolds.
Bruce, in the Big 12, a couple of jobs open up and are filled by guys who were there previously, Scott Frost in UCF and Rich Rodriguez in West Virginia. And I see, the circus that is in Morgantown today, and I mean that in a good way. People seem to be fired up, but there's definitely some detractors. But just what did you make of both those programs dipping back into the past and trying to rekindle that magic flame of success they had years ago?
Well, I think the Rich Rod piece is not at all surprising because he had the biggest heavy hitters in West Virginia on his side. Ken Kendrick, who owns the Arizona Diamondbacks, has always been close to Rich Rod and wanted him back. And Pat McAfee, who's like the biggest voice in sports media now, is obviously a great punter kicker for West Virginia and played for Rich Rod. I think he's very happy by this. So, I mean, he did an amazing job at West Virginia when he was there. I mean, they were a top 10 program. He's a really good offensive coach. The other thing that's huge in this case is he played there. He grew up there. He is one of them. He understands West Virginia better than anybody who's probably coaching in football right now. So I think it's a really good hire by West Virginia. I think it's going to be a pain in the behind for other Big 12 coaches because I think he will get them better. I mean, you look at what he did. He wasn't a good fit at Michigan when he got there. I mean, he took over at a weird time. and there was going to be a big transition, and they didn't really give it that much time, and he was gone. But if you look at what he just did at Jacksonville State, I mean, that's a program that just became an FBS program, and they just won a conference title. He's a really good coach. Scott Frost I'm curious how that works, because he had 2 terrific seasons over. The year before he got there, they were a winless team, and then in year 2 they go undefeated. But then he went home to Nebraska and he bombed miserably.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought he was going to be a terrific hire there, and he wasn't. And digging in a little bit, when you talk to people who are on his staff at UCF, they will point out that he followed George O'Leary at UCF, and George O'Leary is kind of this hard-ass guy, and maybe a lot of the players didn't like him, but they had good players in there. And then Scott Frost's staff went in there and really connected with the players, and they responded. I don't think Gus Malzahn's the same. It's not the same kind of transitional, dynamic, but he, considering what I think they were looking at, I think this is probably a good hire. I think it's weird to say because he's from Nebraska, but I think he's probably in more of a comfort zone in Orlando than he was back in Lincoln, trying to restart something that has been really, had kind of flatlined for a long time.
How much did Belichick lean on Saban at all on returning to college football?
I'm sure he, reached out to him, because obviously they go way back and they coach together with the Browns. The thing I would be, when you asked me that, I'm like, I don't know how much you would have really leaned on him from this standpoint. A year ago, Nick Saban left.
Yep.
And a big part of his decision was he had done 40 some exit interviews and just kind of cringed at what he was hearing. And in this mentality coming from portal and NIL. So that's not gone away. It's only gotten more further entrenched. And so if that drove Nick Saban away, and Nick Saban's in his 70s and he had lived it, I mean, I don't know how Bill Belichick's going to deal with it for very long. My hunch is, I wrote this in a column on The Athletic this morning. I think he will have success, early, but I don't think he's going to be able to tolerate some of the stuff that, talking to a lot of football coaches in college, that drives them up a wall. I just don't think he's going to want to deal with it.
Bruce, do you think that he will retread some guys like Joe Judge? I mean, Freddie Kitchens coached with him already, and he's already there, and he's going to stay. But the Joe Judges of the world, I don't know if you're going to get, Matt Patricia and Josh McDaniels down there, or does he go get elite college coaches that he likes outside of maybe his son Steve or people like that?
I think it'll be some of the names. I agree with you. I think Joe Judge will be back there. He's an analyst for Lane Kiffin now. He spent 3 years on Nick Saban's staff. Of the Belichick tree, he's one of the guys who has the most college experience. And honestly, right now he's in it in Oxford. So I would not be surprised to see him there. I would not be surprised to see his son Steve, who was obviously the Washington defense coordinator, at UW. I would not be surprised to see him coming. I think he may bring 1 or 2 assistants from there that work with him on the defensive side of the ball. I imagine he's going to have, because he already just hired, as you said, he has Freddie Kitchens. He also hired Mike Lombardi, who he's known for probably 35 years, to be the GM. I think he's going to have a pretty strong core of guys who have worked with him, because, all coaches are kind of creatures of habit. Him in his 70s, out of his comfort zone, which is going to be, I don't think he's just going to have all of a sudden a lot of guys that he's not very familiar with. I mean, I think there'll be a strong balance, a strong mix of guys that know how he wants things done.
He is the greatest NFL coach of all time. That could always be debated with Lombardi and Landry and many others, Chuck Noll, et cetera. It is still hard for me to imagine, though, that he leaves so close to Don Shula's all-time wins and loss record. But he's always been kind of a unique dude, right? Do you feel like he just got fed up with the wait and was frustrated with the process of getting the job back in the NFL?
Yeah, the one person I've talked to who's pretty close to him and has had a lot of conversations with him over the last couple of weeks said he just didn't think he was going to get a job in this cycle. I mean, remember, there was 8 openings last year. He only got 1 interview with the Falcons. And that job went to Raheem Morris. So now a year later, I don't know if he's just, had to feel the landscape and go, I'm not going to get what I want. And so he felt like, if I'm ever going to do this, do it now at 72. I mean, what is interesting, and I had somebody who actually was a former Belichick assistant, noted this and pointed it out. It was like, he has basically a 1-year situation where his buyout drops quite a bit after the first year. So there's, it goes from like $10 million to $1 million. And the thinking being, well, maybe if there's something out there that he's really interested in and is interested in him, a year from now he could get it. And while that's true, but he'd also be 74 years old by the time that NFL season starts. I don't know how many, teams are going to say, hey, we wouldn't have, he's been out for 3 years. Now all of a sudden we want him. But, stranger things have happened, and him taking a job in North Carolina would absolutely qualify as stranger to me.
Is there any chance, and I ask you this, Bruce, only because we've seen boxers at the end of their career, they keep coming back. Do you feel like there's any way at all this ends badly and this doesn't work?
Yeah, I think there's definitely that. I mean, I don't think he's going to go there and go 3-9.
Right,
I mean, as you guys know, like North Carolina has never been bad. They just haven't been that good. Like they've had 2 seasons since Mac left to go to Austin, whatever that was, basically 30 years ago, where they've finished in the top 25. But they had 8 seasons where they've won at least 8 games. Butch Davis won, was pretty good there. Mac was pretty good. I mean, they're going to a bowl game and they still fired him. It's not like, my point is, it's not like it's the team that the program Dion took over where they were a 1-win team. I think let's be honest, he's going into the ACC, not the SEC. Like we just saw SMU go in there from the AAC and almost win the league and go to the playoff. We saw Manny Diaz take over Duke and win 9 games. We saw Fran Brown, who'd never been a coordinator anywhere, become the head coach at Syracuse and win 9 games. This is not like a meat grinder. I mean, I think I'll be surprised if he doesn't win at least 8 games next year because I think he's that good of a coach, and everybody I talk to thinks he's that brilliant. And I could see him getting him in the top 25, but I just don't see him dealing with all the external stuff about dealing with agents, and that not the agents like that he would be dealing with in the NFL. These are different kinds of agents. These are like unlicensed mostly, and I just feel like it's way unregulated. And I think that lack of structure and the chaos that surrounds college football now, I think that ultimately will drive him away from it.
Bruce, the North Carolina, just as a football program, you mentioned they've been average, and that's been their curse. Is they're woefully average. They're elite basketball. They're elite. Like you go through all their athletic department, there's not really a lot of pockmarks on it, of accomplishment. But they're kind of the flagship school of the ACC, and nobody in that conference has underachieved in football, maybe more than them, given the fact that they've kind of run the show for a long time in that conference. Is part of this just being fed up with 40 years of blah?
I think there was a weird power dynamic that was at play here, where it didn't seem like the AD wanted him, probably wanted somebody else to be the next head coach, but the regent really wanted Bill Belichick in there. I'm sure that drove it, because they went from like $5 million a year to $10 million a year. That's not easy to do, in college athletics to ramp it up like that. So clearly there was like, it's Bill Belichick. I don't think they were doing that if, whoever the coach, and you can say, pick the coach, whether it's a guy who was very well regarded, but like for them to go throw $10 million at somebody, that North Carolina wasn't even thinking about about anything like that. But in this case, it's Bill Belichick. They swung for the fences, and they got their coach. And, look, it's just like with Boulder, Colorado. Dion made a program that nobody really cared about or was interested in, kind of must-see TV as a rating. So I think Bill Belichick will do something similar in Chapel Hill.
Have you, and I know you have an array of what we used to call a Rolodex, your contacts in your phone. You talked about the text you received that kind of gave you a little bit of a heads up. What are other coaches saying to you about this move? What is kind of the overall general feedback on this move from those you have texted you, et cetera?
A bunch of them have been pretty, I think they have been not just diplomatic, but I think they have a lot of respect for Belichick. Belichick, from the guys I heard from, whether they coached for him or have been around him, have a ton of respect for him. Obviously, I know Dave Aranda's, local and near for you guys. Like, he's one of like a handful of guys I know who was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time around Bill Belichick and, pick his brain. And everything I'd heard was Belichick would always download those college coaches who would visit him about what they knew and was very curious and everything. And I think he's one of these guys that I think a lot of football coaches, especially the X and O guys, have an incredible amount of admiration and respect for, and I think they know how brilliant he is on some of those things. I don't get the sense, and it's still pretty new, obviously, but I don't get the sense, like, when Dion got to Boulder, I think there was a lot of skepticism because he was talking about doing things that were probably rubbing some people the wrong way, or it was just kind of really brash. I think because of who Belichick was in the coaching world, football coaches probably are going to be a lot more deferential, and that's the word I would use. I meant to say diplomatic. I use diplomatic, but I think they're just very deferential because of he's Bill Belichick. He's a guy that whether they like the Patriots or not, and these are football coaches, not like football, like just fans and sports bars. But I think they have so much admiration and respect for him as a coach that I think that he's just looked at differently.
Last thing, Bruce, from me, and then go ahead, Paul. You ask first.
I do need to ask. Dabo Swinney is reportedly going to host a portal player. Is he okay? Did something happen, or is this just inevitable because after 4 years of not doing it, you're eventually going to hit a spot on the roster where you've got to pull that club out of the bag?
Yeah, I thought he would have hit that spot a long time. Like those programs who like it just happens. Either you get hit by injuries in a spot, or the recruiting class, you have a bunch of holes, and it's like, how do we replenish the receiver room or the DB room or whatever it is? I'm just surprised he had held out this long. So that's why it's kind of newsworthy that he's kind of dipping his toe in it. But look, I mean, credit to Dabo here. Like, I think after they got blown out by Georgia in the opener, I think a lot of people, myself included, were like, I don't think Dabo is going to. We have we've had this conversation on our podcast, The Audible, more than a time or two about like, do you think Dabo ever wins another national title? I mean, very few guys, as you know, who are active now have national title rings. He's got 2. Kirby Smart has 2. I don't think he's winning one this year, but the fact that they're in the playoff, even if it is winning the ACC, is noteworthy, and so I think, like he's earned the right to do things how he sees fit because he's done an amazing job by and large over a long period of time at Clemson. And it wouldn't surprise me if they made some noise in the playoff because he's got Cade Klubnik playing well and they definitely have some talent. So, I feel like there's a lot of us who kind of like shrug their shoulders at Dabo because he's done things a lot differently, but he's obviously been a great coach for Clemson.
I'm still looking. Bruce, first of all, thanks for your time. The story in The Athletic, there's no reason Belichick can't have success at UNC. Just don't expect him to last long. Is that first 18 to 22-year-old that gives him an attitude. Now, NFL athletes, because of agents and all that, they could be grumpy. Look at the guy from San Francisco walking off the field last night. But I just wonder that first one, and he's going to go, what the hell am I doing here? I just, because that's going to happen in any office, any profession, but I look forward to that first time when some college kid wants to not give him an immediate answer on whether or not he's going to come play at North Carolina.
Yeah, look, I mean, he coached a lot of people who were like knuckleheads or whatever you want to describe it, a bunch of guys who people thought couldn't get right. And some of them did when they were in New England. Now, some of them didn't, you know, and I think that is only going there's going to be a bunch of them. And I think, you know, like Nick Saban, for all his success, you know, he definitely had some of those players who just, you know, you get penalized by talent, you're going to give it a chance, and then it's just not going to work, you know. And I think you're not going to bat 1,000 in this day and age because the internet is what it is. We'll probably hear about these things pretty fast, you know. And so just hopefully there's not going to be those, you know, I don't think there will be, but like the Brian Kelly dancing from the podium with the recruit. I don't think we'll see those.
No, I don't think so. Who knows? Hey, man, thank you as always, Bruce. Whenever we get you, it's special. Thanks for your time. Enjoy as the playoffs begin
Happy
next
holidays,
week.
guys. Thank
you.
Holidays. Thanks for
Thank you. Bruce Feldman, theathletic.com with us.